If you've been trading long enough to know better, but you're still not profitable, this is likely the video you've been missing. The reason you aren't profitable yet isn't what you think it is. You see it, you won't be able to unsee it. What I'm about to show you isn't another strategy tweak or a minor mindset adjustment. It's a complete reframe of what profitability actually requires. That reframe is what separates traders who eventually make it from traders who stay stuck no matter how much they learn. This isn't for beginners who haven't learned a strategy yet. It's for traders who've studied setups, risk management, and psychology, all the things you're supposed to study, and still feel like something isn't clicking despite doing everything the books and courses told you to do. I've seen this pattern show up in traders who should be profitable by now based on their knowledge and screen time. It shows up the same way every single time. Once you recognize it in yourself, you can finally do something about it instead of continuing to bang your head against the same invisible wall. By the end of this video, you're going to have one clear, aha moment. It's the kind that changes how you interpret your trades, your mistakes, and your results going forward. Not a new strategy, not a new indicator. Another piece of information to add to the pile of things you already know. What you're getting is a shift in how you understand why profitability actually happens. Shift is what makes everything you already know suddenly start working in ways it hasn't been working up until now. It starts with a misunderstanding almost every trader carries for years without realizing it. A misunderstanding about what the target actually is and what you're supposed to be aiming for when you sit down to trade. To explain it, we need to talk about what most traders think profitability looks like and why that belief quietly holds them back from ever reaching it, no matter how hard they work. Traders aim for the wrong form of profitability. This is the first realization that has to click before anything else can fall into place. Happens is that traders chase being right instead of being aligned with probability. Those two things sound similar. They create completely different behaviors that lead to completely different results. Being right means your analysis was correct, your prediction came true, and the market did what you expected. Being aligned with probability means you executed a process that produces positive expectancy over time, regardless of whether any individual trade worked out. The difference seems small, but in practice, it's the difference between traders who eventually become consistently profitable and traders who remain inconsistent forever. When your goal is to be right, every trade becomes a test of whether you understand the market. Losses feel like failures that need to be prevented through better analysis or better timing. Your goal is to be aligned with probability. Every trade is just another execution of a process that works over time. Losses are expected outcomes that don't require fixing, because they're part of how the math produces profits. Let me show you what this looks like in the day-to-day experience of trading. Trader refines their strategy endlessly, tweaking entry criteria, adjusting stop placement, and adding filters to improve win rate. They spend hours backtesting variations to find the optimal parameters. They look for setups that have the highest probability of working, avoid trades that create discomfort. Success trade by trade based on whether they were right about direction. Every loss triggers analysis of what went wrong. Every win reinforces the approach that produced it. The entire process is oriented around increasing the percentage of trades that work. This seems like responsible trading, like exactly what a serious trader should be doing. What's actually happening is that they're trying to prove they're profitable instead of being profitable. That distinction is what keeps them stuck. Proving profitability means demonstrating through results that you can predict market movement accurately, which requires a high win rate and careful trade selection that avoids uncertainty. Being profitable means executing a process that produces more money than it loses over time, which requires consistency and acceptance of uncertainty rather than avoidance of it. The trader who's trying to prove profitability will skip trades that don't feel certain, will exit winners early to lock in proof that they were right, avoid drawdown by reducing position size after losses, and will constantly adjust their approach based on recent results. All of this creates inconsistency in execution that destroys whatever edge the strategy had. It feels like smart trading because each decision seems defensible in isolation. The problem is that these defensible decisions add up to random execution. Random execution doesn't produce consistent results, no matter how good the underlying strategy is. Leads to a hidden behavior that quietly caps results, a behavior that operates below conscious awareness and sabotages profitability before it has a chance to develop. The behavior is treating each trade as an independent event that needs to be optimized rather than as one iteration of a process that only works across many iterations. You optimize individual trades, You make decisions based on the specific circumstances of that moment. Means your execution changes constantly based on factors that have nothing to do with whether the strategy has an edge. Profitability doesn't come from better predictions. It comes from better alignment with uncertainty. The traders who make it aren't the ones who learn to predict the market more accurately. They're the ones who learn to execute their process consistently, regardless of how uncertain each individual trade feels. That alignment requires giving up the need to be right on each trade and replacing it with a commitment to executing probability over time. Is a harder shift than it sounds because being right feels good, and not knowing if you're right feels terrible. Brings us to the second realization most traders don't have until much later. There's a gap between knowing what to do and allowing it to work. Traders interfere with profitable behavior before it has time to compound into actual results. You can know exactly what you're supposed to do, have a tested strategy with clear rules, and understand the psychology of trading, but still fail to be profitable because knowing and allowing are completely different skills. Knowing is intellectual, it's information you've acquired through study. Allowing is behavioral, it's the capacity to let something unfold without interference, even when that unfolding creates discomfort. Traders interfere with profitable behavior and don't even realize they're doing it because the interference looks like smart adjustments rather than sabotage. The interference happens in the space between entering a trade and letting it resolve according to your plan. That space is where most strategies get destroyed by the trader who built them. Let me walk you through what this actually looks like so you can recognize it. You take a valid trade that meets all your criteria. The setup is clean, the risk is appropriate, and the entry is executed according to plan. Everything up to this point has been mechanical and rule-based. But then the market pauses, doesn't immediately move in your direction, or it dips slightly against you. None of this invalidates the trade, it's just normal market behavior. But in that pause, in that moment of not knowing, your emotions activate. The discomfort of uncertainty triggers thoughts about recent losses or whether you should protect capital by exiting early. These thoughts feel like analysis, but they are actually interference driven by the discomfort of not knowing. This is when the trader adjusts, not through obvious mistakes like panic selling, through subtle modifications that seem reasonable. Exiting at break even because the trade wasn't acting right. Maybe moving the stop tighter to reduce risk. Each adjustment has a justification that sounds smart. What's really happening is that the trader is managing their emotional state rather than managing the trade according to the plan. The critical insight here is that the trader didn't lose discipline, they lost tolerance for not knowing. Discipline is about following rules, and most traders follow their rules right up until the discomfort of uncertainty becomes too much to tolerate. At that point, they start making adjustments that technically break the rules but feel like improvements. Those adjustments are what destroy the edge. The strategy needed you to let the trade develop. You needed to reduce the discomfort of not knowing if it would work, and your need won out over the strategy's requirements. This gap doesn't close with experience the way you'd expect. You'd think that after years of trading, you'd develop more tolerance for uncertainty. But what actually happens is that traders get better at justifying their interference. They get better at disguising emotional reactions as strategic decisions. A trader with 1 year of experience might admit they were scared. A trader with 5 years of experience will explain the same exit using sophisticated terminology about volatility or opportunity cost. You can't address something you've successfully disguised as good trading. Consistency isn't about control, it's about restraint. Traders think consistency means controlling their emotions or their reactions. But control is still about doing something. What consistency actually requires is restraint, which is about not doing something even when every part of you wants to. Restraint is letting the trade develop without interference. If you can't stay neutral after entry, strategy survives. The moment you enter a trade, your job shifts from analysis to neutrality. Neutrality means not having a preference for how things unfold beyond hoping your plan works out. You can't be neutral if you're monitoring price constantly or narrating what each tick means, which leads to the final aha. Profitability isn't something you achieve, it's something you allow. It emerges when you stop interrupting your edge, when you get out of your own way and let the mathematical properties of your strategy express themselves over time without constant interference. Profits happen. Profitability isn't built by forcing outcomes. You can't force a trade to work. What you can do is execute a process that has an edge and then allow that edge to compound. Allowing requires giving up control and the belief that you can avoid losses through better decision-making in the middle of a trade. When this shift happens, it isn't dramatic. A trader stops refining their strategy constantly and stops looking for the next indicator. They execute fewer trades because they're only taking the ones that clearly meet their criteria. Their execution becomes boring, mechanical, and repetitive. They aren't doing impressive analysis. They're just taking their setups, managing them according to plan, and moving on without emotional residue. The results stabilize because they stopped sabotaging the edge they already had. The trader didn't get smarter, they got quieter. The internal dialogue that used to run constantly during trades, the narration of what each price movement means, quiets down. To check positions constantly or compare today's results to yesterday's fades, because they've accepted that short-term results don't tell them anything meaningful about the process. Consistency takes over. Taking the same trades in the same way, regardless of recent results or how confident they feel, is what finally allows the edge to compound. Only works when you execute it the same way every time. Here is the one clean rule: if your behavior changes after you enter a trade, you're still trying to control outcomes. Your entry is based on analysis. That's where your decision-making happens. After entry, your job is to follow the management plan. If you deviate based on how the trade makes you feel, you're trying to control the uncontrollable. Most traders stay stuck because they are optimizing the wrong thing. They are trying to get better at predicting instead of better at allowing. They are trying to increase their win rate instead of their consistency. They are trying to feel certain instead of building tolerance for uncertainty. All that effort goes into areas that don't produce profitability. But you don't have to follow that path. It requires accepting that the path to profitability is counterintuitive. Less doing and more allowing is what actually works. Getting quieter and more boring is what lets the edge compound. You aren't unprofitable because you lack knowledge. You're unprofitable because you keep stepping in front of probability. You have enough information to be profitable right now if you could just execute what you know without interference. Interference happens automatically whenever uncertainty triggers discomfort. The solution isn't to learn more or find a better strategy. It's to recognize the pattern of interference and choose restraint instead of action. That choice has to be made in the moment when you're feeling the urge to modify your plan. You aren't choosing between smart and dumb trading, you're choosing between interference and allowing. Interference might save you from one loss or lock in one win. It destroys the consistency your edge requires. Without consistency, your results will always be random. Allowing might feel passive and leave you uncomfortable. It preserves the consistency that lets the edge compound. In 2026, profitability won't come from doing more, it'll come from interfering less. The traders who break through this year won't be the ones with a new secret indicator. They'll be the ones who realize they already have what they need, and the only thing standing in the way is their own interference. A how moment is recognizing what's been stopping you and making the decision to get out of your own way. Stop trying to prove you're profitable through being right and start allowing profitability through consistent execution. Stop trying to control outcomes and start practicing restraint. Stop measuring progress trade by trade and start measuring it by how consistently you execute your process. The stuck traders keep doing more and stay stuck. Successful traders recognize that less interference is what lets the edge work. You already know what to do, you just haven't learned how to allow what you know to work without stepping in front of it. That is the skill that matters most. It determines whether your knowledge produces profits or just more frustration. Building this skill requires deep self-awareness. It means sitting with the discomfort of a trade that is hovering near your stop loss and choosing to do nothing because doing nothing was the original plan. It means watching a trade get within 2 ticks of your profit target and then reverse and still choosing to let it hit your stop if that's what the rules dictate, rather than panicking and closing it manually. This level of psychological fortitude is what the market actually pays you for. It doesn't pay you for your ability to read a chart. It pays you for your ability to remain disciplined when the chart makes you feel uneasy. The market is essentially a mechanism for transferring money from the impatient and the interferers to the patient and the allowers. Consider the math of a basic edge. If you have a strategy that wins 50% of the time with a 21 reward to risk ratio, you are mathematically guaranteed to make money over a large enough sample size. However, if you interfere, if you cut your winners at 1-1 because you were afraid they would turn into losers, or if you move your stops further away because you were sure the market would bounce, you have effectively deleted your edge. You are now trading a strategy with a negative expectancy and no amount of market mastery can save you from the eventual drain of your capital. Traders are actually trading a winning strategy but producing losing results because their manual interventions turn a full EV system into an EV system. In this new year, goal should be to become a non-entity during the duration of a trade. Once the orders are placed, your personality, your fears, your bills, and your ego should have zero impact on what happens next. You must become the silent observer of your own system. This requires a fundamental shift in identity. Move from being a market analyst to being a process manager. An analyst is always looking for new data to change their mind. A manager is focused on ensuring the factory line. Trading strategy runs exactly as designed without breakdown. When you stop looking at the screen as a place to make money and start looking at it as a place to practice flawless execution, it starts taking care of itself. Furthermore, we must address the false improvement trap. This is the cycle where a trader has a bad week, blames the strategy, and changes a rule. They feel better because they did something to fix the problem. But in reality, they just reset their statistical sample size back to zero. They never allow the law of large numbers to work because they are constantly changing the variables. To be a professional, you must be willing to endure the variance. Variance is the natural noise. In the data, the string of 5 losses that can happen even in a great system. The amateur sees variance as a reason to change. Professional sees variance as the cost of doing business. If you can't pay the cost of the losses, you don't get to keep the profit from the wins. Ultimately, your success in the coming months will depend on your ability to embrace the boredom. If your trading feels like a high-stakes thriller, you're likely doing it wrong. It should feel more like watching paint dry or working an assembly line. When you reach the point where a win doesn't make you high and a loss doesn't make you low, you have finally arrived. You have achieved the neutrality required to let the math work. This is the secret hidden in plain sight. It's not about finding a better alpha. It's about preserving the alpha you already found. Stop stepping in front of the train of probability and let it carry you to your destination. The edge is there. The strategy is there. Now, simply allow it to be.